Fantasy football season is going to be here before we know it, and that's why today we've got 10 players that you'll need to build your team around.
It's about that time.
Stoned on Sports.
How's it going, everybody? You are tuned in to Stoned on Sports Fantasy Football Edition, and this is our first live stream of the 2024 season.
Heck yeah.
You know, it's a little bit early, but we can't wait for football. My name is Matt, got the awesome co-host Kyle here. You can find us both on X at SOSP_Matt and at SOSP_Kyle. You can find the show at Stoned on Sports 1. I'm really excited to do this today, dude. I'm thrilled. How the hell are you doing?
Doing great. We've been talking about baseball for months now. It's nice to mix in a little fantasy football. I think we'll be live every other Sunday on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. from here on out until the start of the season, talking as much fantasy football as we can. So let's get into it. We're going to start with quarterbacks. This first one is an NFC North quarterback. First season as a starter, didn't really start out all that hot. And then seemingly, really overnight, starting from about week 9 through the end of the divisional round, this man went from an objectively mediocre QB to PFF's top graded passer and one of the top 2 most efficient QBs by expected points added. Matt, why is Jordan Love a must draft?
Jordan Love, and I already screwed
Didn't
up
have
and
the
put the
picture
wrong
ready?
thing on there. I had the banner ready. Here we go. Now we got the graphic. Green
Yeah,
Bay's
nice.
new franchise QB there. Look, it last year, the dude objectively had a good season. When you look at his season-long numbers, he threw for over 4,150 yards, 32 touchdowns, 11 picks, chipped in another just under 250 on the ground with 4 touchdowns. He finished as a QB5 overall with 330 points, coming in at 19.4 per game. And it was strange because he only had 7 top 10 weekly finishes, but he was very, very consistent. He finished within 5 points of his 19-point average in 13 of 17 games. And it was nice to see last year. He showed the ability to extend plays, even if he isn't necessarily a runner. He was still second in the NFL in yards per scramble. And you were right. You kind of touched on this during the lead in. Things were rough to start the year. And then we saw his season turn around, especially in pertaining to his ball security. From that week 10 point onward, he had just 1 interception and 4 total turnovers. He completed over 70% of his passes with 20 total touchdowns. He increased his PFF pass grade by 30 points, and his yards per attempt went from 6.4 to 7.8. He was one of just 6 QBs to average multiple attempts per game, 30 plus yards down the field. 3 of those dudes were Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco, and Mason Rudolph, who combined to play 17 games total last season. He almost, in a way, if you think back to 2022 and how Jared Goff finished out the year, Jordan Love had a very similar finish, but it wasn't all awesome. It wasn't all just him. There was some growth from the rookie wide receivers and tight ends, and there were some schematic changes as well. The team increased their play action rate to nearly 30%. And look, Jordan Love was top 3 in yards and touchdowns from play action. They also used more shifting and motion. This season, he's going to have, in theory, a healthy Christian Watson to throw to now that he's kind of figured out the hamstring issue that's plagued him. He's currently the 8th QB off the board in NFFC drafts with an ADP of 62, and he has the most volatile draft position of any of the top 10 QBs. In some drafts, he's going inside the top 50 and others outside the top 110. I think QB8 is just about right for him, but I do think there is a little bit of room for profit with him going as the 8th QB off the board. I imagine we might see that creep up a little bit as we get closer to and into draft season.
Excellent. Good stuff there, man.
Yeah. So we've got another QB for you, and this rookie signal caller showed us in college that he can win with his legs and his arm, and that helped propel him to a Heisman Trophy win. Kyle, what should fantasy players expect from the Commanders' Jayden Daniels this season?
Huge rushing upside. I think he's going to be huge in fantasy this season. So he was a number 2 pick in the draft this year from LSU. Last year, with his bowl stats included in 12 games, over 3,800 passing yards, 40 pass touchdowns with and 4 interceptions, with a nice completion percentage over 72% on the ground. Rushed another 135 times for over 1,100 yards, averaged 8.4 yards per carry, with another 10 more touchdowns on the ground. Matt mentioned he's a dynamic rusher with a pretty accurate arm. Some of his ranks in the draft class: number 1 in yards per attempt at 11.5, number 13 in ADOT, average depth of target. So that's not just a bunch of doinking type passes. And the dude really has no problem staying in the pocket. 35 of his 40 touchdowns in college last season were from the pocket, and a passer rating the best in the nation of 144 when in the pocket. He was number 2. He was the second best in PFF turnover worthy play rate. Tells me that he makes smart decisions with the football when it's in his hands. And number 1 in PFF big time throw rate. You don't score 40 pass touchdowns without some electric passes down the field. And he consistently tested defenses down the field with his legs, accounting for 90 plays of 20 plus yards or more. Talking about the team there in Washington, there's no veteran there on board that should have a leg up versus Daniel for starting possibilities. Marcus Mariota and Jeff Driscoll, don't stand an effing chance there. And he's got a nice infrastructure of pass catchers, improving offensive line. Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson there make for a legitimate 2 wide receiver set. They have Zach Ertz now. He's, getting older there in years, of course, but he's still an average, he's a capable tight end. Austin Eckler signed there in the offseason. He'll look to bounce back to hopefully being one of the better pass catching backs in the league after an injury filled season last year. And talking more about McLaurin, I think he's the biggest beneficiary of Daniels' deep ball. The new OC there, Cliff Kingsbury, he's known for his air raid, or the some people call it the horizontal raid offense there. And in his coaching career, he's coached some super athletically gifted QBs, Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, of course, Kyler Murray, and during his time as head coach with the Arizona Cardinals, his teams finished in the top 10 in pass attempts that traveled 20 plus air yards down the field in 2021 and 22. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this Washington offense can do. And he's got just amazing accuracy, more specifically with fade balls, especially down the sideline. That just screams McLaurin to me. He can catch those balls. He's just never really had a QB in his career that could throw them very well. And let's not forget, again, he can run, he can scramble, he can do it at an elite level. And the dagger comes when he escapes the pocket on passing plays that, the coverage is pretty good. A quarterback who can demolish defenses with QB draws is a dangerous weapon too. He had 12 quarterback draw runs last year, got off runs of 12, 14, 17, 27, 35, and 40 yards out of them. Right now on NFFC draft boards, he's going the number 14 QB drafted with an ADP right around 102. You can't go wrong with this guy with his mix of making ability with his legs and arm. Makes for a huge fantasy piece in his rookie year and beyond, really. All right, moving on to running backs. One of my favorite. I'm a Lions fan. Matt's got his what you got? Your Calvin Johnson jersey on?
Yes, sir.
So this Lions running back enters his sophomore season looking to build on his productive rookie season in 2023. And I believe he'll have the chance for 250 plus total touches in 2024. Matt, is this the year Jahmyr Gibbs ascends to the ranks of the elite?
I think it is, but at the same time, you could almost make the argument that he's already there.
Sure.
Right. And I think back to the 2023 NFL draft, and people were just trashing the shit out of the Lions for making this pick, but it was Detroit that got the last laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Gibbs come in, and 182 rush attempts, 945 yards, 10 touchdowns on the ground, was targeted 71 times in the passing game. He caught 52 for another 316 yards and another touch. He's just awesome. There's a reason why he's on the thumbnail today. He was one of just 4 players with 180 yards or 180 rush attempts or more to average more than 5 yards per carry. Looking across the fantasy landscape, he finished as the RB10 in PPR, half PPR, and standard. Although it's worth noting in standard leagues, his backfield mate, David Montgomery, finished 9th, one position ahead of him. Scored 242 points in a PPR, averaging 16.1. He had 6 top 5 finishes at the position. He finished as a weekly RB2 or better in all but 2 weeks, one of which was his first game against the Chiefs, where he slipped on his way to the end zone. He also showed that despite his size, he can handle a large workload. Monty was hurt, and what does he do but come in with a 31 touch, 189 total yard, 1 touchdown effort against the Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football. And this dude is one of the most explosive running backs in the league. He's second in the NFL in rushes of 20 plus yards with 10, tied for second with 4 runs of 30 or more yards. And it felt like they left some meat on the bone in terms of the passing game.
Absolutely.
And this year, you're hearing rumors of increased usage in the passing game, and not just as a dump-off option out of the backfield, but lining up as a receiver and working a little bit further downfield into the intermediate areas. The question really is going to be if that's going to result in additional touches or if it's going to be a reallocation of his current workload. Right now, he's a 4th running back off the board with an ADP of 11, so he's right there towards the end of the first round in 12-team leagues. I think he's a fantastic RB1 option. I think you are absolutely right that he's going to be looking at 250 touches this year, maybe a little bit more if they do end up using him more in the pass game like they said. Those are going to be higher quality touches where he's likely to not take the beating that he normally would if you're just handing the ball off to him.
Yeah. And it helps that, David Montgomery is there. He can, Jahmyr Gibbs won't take a beating running the ball up the gut there or whatever. That'll be Monty's territory, and I love it. I'm looking forward to the Lions offense being a top 5 offense again.
Absolutely. So we got another running back for you, and this Steelers running back was nearly as productive as Gibbs on a per touch basis, but you can get him about 7 rounds cheaper. Kyle, why don't you tell us why Jaylen Warren is a must draft player this season?
Dude, on NFFC, he is the 25th running back off the board. His ADP is right around 87. I think it's because things look better offensively in Pittsburgh, at least on paper, right? So new OC Arthur Smith, 2 QBs, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are now in town. And I think it's huge for Warren. I think Warren's value is higher in PPR, but he can still be a high-end flex in really all leagues this year. So he's a pass catching back, can run too, but he rushed 150 times last season for almost 800 yards, 5.3 yards per attempt. That was 4th in the league, and he got 4 touchdowns as well. And then that pass catching, I mentioned 72 targets, 61 he caught for 370 yards, just 5 drops all season. Really was one of the most explosive and elusive backs in the NFL. Last season, he finished 3rd in explosive run rate, 1st in missed tackles forced per attempt, 2nd in yards after contact per attempt. Not to mention, he finished 12th in yards per route run and 5th in targets per route run. If these numbers don't jump off the page, then you are not fucking paying attention. He finished as the RB29 in fantasy points per game last year, but that really doesn't tell the entire story. He was an RB2 or better in weekly scoring in 50% of his games. Now, Najee Harris should remain the workhorse there when it comes to carrying the ball, but Warren will mix in and get plenty of work in the passing game. I even heard one fantasy analyst say Najee will wear them down and Warren will gash them bitches. The offense in Pittsburgh, it should be improved, right? With the addition of offensive coordinator Arthur Smith, I mentioned, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, plus they've done some work on the O-line. It's vastly improved as well. Now, Matt can attest, he agreed as well, but we did not disliked Arthur Smith for his work in Atlanta, but I was really intrigued with him in his performance in Tennessee. In his time as Titans OC, the Titans ranked 5th in yards per play in both 2019 and 2020. In the Titans' overall EPA, or expected points added, they were 6th in the league. Their first down EPA was 5th in the league, and their second down EPA was 2nd in the league. So we talked about Russell Wilson. He's the favorite for starter, right? What's something that Russ has done a lot of that could have a positive impact on Warren? Check down passes. Check down passes are an invaluable part of the modern passing game in the NFL. Russell Wilson, or Captain Dump, if you prefer, had the highest check down percentage, 10.2% among all QBs with at least 300 dropbacks in the last 2 seasons combined. Now, it's worth noting, in Seattle, he had just a 5.8 check down rate in 2020 and 21 combined. So it's very possible, that environment was a pretty big factor there in Denver, with Hackett's head coach, that disaster, Russell's first year there. So we'll see. Let's see. Looking at strength of schedule, too, according to Fantasy Pros, Pittsburgh has a pretty favorable damn schedule for running backs in which they should perform better than average. And long term, he is an excellent dynasty pick. I believe Warren will be the running back of the future there in Pittsburgh. The Steelers did not elect to pick up Najee Harris's 5th-year option this year. So if you're betting on talent, and you should be, there aren't many better options to grab in drafts that have his type of upside if anything were to happen to Najee Harris. He is worth drafting, in my opinion, as early as round 7 in all formats.
I agree. And part of what makes him so good is his efficiency.
Yeah, right? Just off the numbers. Very, very good. Off the chart. All right. We're headed to the wide receiver room, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. All right. This Atlanta Falcons wide receiver had a less than ideal start to his career after finishing as the PPR wide receiver 31 and 37 in his first 2 years. Despite poor quarterback play, he has shown that he has the talent to become a team's true number 1 wide receiver. Matt, it's not a question if he will eat, but how much. Will Drake London finish as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy this year?
I absolutely think so. You said it. He finished as the wide receiver 37 last year, tied with Romeo Doubs, had 174.4 points, averaged 10.9 points per game. And how the hell did he get there, right? Because he's got all the talent in the world. Well, last year, he started with a damn goose egg in week 1. Sure. And that sent just panic through fantasy land, myself included. Holy shit, why did I take him? I'm in trouble. I'm screwed. and despite that, look, he had 110 targets, had 69 receptions for 905 yards, just 2 touchdowns on a 21.7% target share, which is criminally low for a wide receiver like him. I mean, this dude has been the victim of shitty offenses and even worse QB play. Less than 75% of his targets were catchable last year, right? We know how bad Justin Fields was. DJ Moore had a better catchable target rate from Justin Fields than what Drake London got from his quarterbacks, despite a similar ADOT. He had just 2 games last season over 20 points in a PPR. PFF was higher on him than his performance would indicate. He was rated as the 23rd best receiver. I'll agree with that, and I think there's going to be some growth there this year. But the dude had 8 games under 10 points. But still, he is an all-pro level talent. Enter Kirk Cousins and a new coaching staff. You got Zach Robinson at the helm running the offense. He got some great results last year out of Puka as the pass game coordinator for the Rams. And just because of where we're coming from, there's no way in hell the offense will be as terrible and poorly managed as it was last season. The dude had just 3 games with double-digit targets and just 5 with 9 or more. He did have a good amount of red zone looks, though, which was nice. He had 16 of them. That was tied for 16th. He was also 16th in receptions of over 20 yards with 17. But this dude is going to eat. And he needs to be around that 160 target mark this season if he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver, which I think he can. Right now, he's the number 11 receiver off the board with an ADP of 20, meaning you can get him right around that 2-3 turn. I'm absolutely thrilled to get him there. I think that still leaves a little meat on the bone for him as well, and some opportunity for profit, especially if some of the other receivers who are going ahead of him take a step back this year. And there's a few that I have in mind who just may. Now, one thing I have to point out, because we want to be honest and transparent here, I understand everybody is thrilled about Kirk Cousins going there, but we're also talking about a quarterback in his mid-30s coming off a torn Achilles. There is a non-zero chance that he is not what he used to be. And the dude was on track for a career year last season. Truth be told, though, I think he's going to come back and be just fine. He's the pocket passer. Nobody is going to confuse him with Lamar Jackson. He's not rolling out and extending plays like he is. He's not as much of a statue as Joe Flacco is, but that's not his game. There's a plethora of targets there, and I think there's going to be several members of that offense that eat this year, not just London.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Bijan's going to be, Kyle Pitts, I think, is going to have his first career year. Good things happening in Atlanta.
And there's good things happening elsewhere, too. This Michigan man finally delivered on the potential we've seen in him and gave us his first 1,000-yard season. Getting CJ Stroud might have helped a little bit too.
Sure did.
Why else do we need to have Nico Collins in our wide receiver core this season?
One word, separation is the word. I'll talk about it in a little while. Or actually, hold on, I messed up. He's wide receiver number 13 off the board on NFFC. ADP is right around 25, so very early first round. He was really always an underrated separator. He just never had the quarterback play to support him. But last year, as you mentioned, he was propelled by his partnership with CJ Stroud, and he had a breakout season in his third year with the Texans. 109 targets, caught 80 of them for almost 1,300 yards. That was 8th in the NFL, and tossed in 8 touchdowns. He was just the third receiver in franchise history for the Texans to hit 1,200 yards or more, joining Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins. Pretty good company. In PPR, he averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game, finishing as the wide receiver 12. And he was really one of the best values in redraft leagues last year, considering most of you probably got him off the waiver wire. He boasted a 24% target share, which in some honesty is a little bit low for me for a team's number one wide receiver, but it's not crap either. His best stat, really, at least to me, he ranks second among all wide receivers with 3.1 yards per route run, a feat achieved by only a select few players since the 2017 season. Tyreek's done it the last 2 seasons. Cooper Kupp did it in 2021, and Julio Jones did it in 2017. That's it. That's the list. Some damn good company to be with there. His ADOT, average depth of target, was okay, a bit middling at 11.5, but those shorter passes turned into a ton of yards after the catch. Among wide receivers with 50% of snaps played, he ranked second with 6.9 yards after catch per reception, and he ranks 6th in average yak above expectation with 2.5 yards. So you can't get any yak unless you catch the fucking football first, right? I didn't mean to swear this much. Sorry. Sorry for cussing. Collins had a catch rate of 73.4%. That ranks 16th among all pass catchers with at least 45 targets. He lined up mostly outside last season, did line up in the slot almost 20% of the time. It's going to be interesting to see, despite the arrival there of Stephon Diggs impacting his target share, I think Collins' efficiency should still remain high in that offense, especially with another threat like Diggs, diverting some of that defensive attention away from Nico. I drafted him in my home league last season in an auction draft for just $9, and I slapped a 2-year contract on him. I just had a feeling I was right. A lot of times I'm wrong. So is Matt. It happens, right?
Don't drag me down with you, damn it.
This is a would you rather. I'll involve you in this. So Michael Pittman and Nico Collins. All right. Both receivers had career years in 2023. Again, Collins finishing 12th and Pittman at 13 in PPR fantasy formats. They are back to back in NFFC ADP, number 25 and number 26 overall. Who would you go with there?
I think Pittman is going to get a larger target share
Yes,
of his team's targets.
I think the volume for sure is.
But I also think that the quality of targets that Nico Collins receives is going to be better because I think I think CJ Stroud is a better passer than Anthony Richardson. I think I would take Nico there, even with Diggs coming to town and them having to reconsider their distribution of targets.
Right. And, if we're splitting hairs, I think, like you said, Pittman should get more volume. It's a more enticing option in PPR formats, while Nico Collins and, his big playability lend his style probably more to standard formats. So awesome. Cool stuff. Good stuff. I love having Nico on my team. I got Stroud too. Got that stack, baby. All right. Another wide receiver. God, love him. This Bucs wide receiver disappointed fantasy managers last year with Mike Evans getting all the attention from new QB Baker Mayfield. But just last week, head coach Todd Bowles says the Bucs plan to play him more in the slot this season. Matt, how can that help Chris Godwin get back to a top 20 fantasy receiver this year?
Chris Godwin or God Chris Win, like this dude, I gotta say, I am thrilled he is going back to the slot. It's where he played, up until last year. And he was very, very successful there. And he's somebody who, as a receiver, he's more effective in the middle of the field and those short to intermediate routes. However, he is a legit deep threat from the slot and has really shown a knack for producing there. He was a wide receiver 28 last season. We're talking a mid to low end wide receiver 3. Scored 209 points, averaged 12.3 points per game. How'd he get there? 130 targets, 83 grabs, 1,024 yards, just 2 touchdowns though. But this dude, he's never really been a big touchdown scorer, right? He set a career high back in 2019 with 9 of them, but he's not had more than 5 since the 2020 season. We did see his yards per catch jump up to 12.3, but it makes sense with the switch outside. But still, it's not. He was playing out of position there. His 73% catchable pass rate was the lowest in his last 5 seasons, and he caught just 1 of his 10 end zone looks. That 10% conversion rate, worst among qualified receivers. The offense, however, is mostly intact from last year. And even though it seemed like a down year, he still had his 3rd straight 1,000-yard season and 4th in 5 years. The offense is going to look a little bit different with last season's offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, moving on to coach the Panthers. And they brought in Liam Cohen, who spent the last 3 years bouncing between the University of Kentucky and the Rams as offensive coordinator. But that time with the Rams, look, we all know Sean McVay is calling plays there.
Right.
I do have a feeling we're going to start to see some more age-related regression from Mike Evans, and I think that's going to help boost Godwin's stock. And there really isn't anyone else there on the team that's going to be drawing significant targets, at least from the wide receiver position. Obviously, Rachaad White, they like to get him involved in the pass game as well, but I'm not really worried about any of the other receivers, and there's no tight end there that's a threat for any kind of consistent production. I think we're going to end up seeing Godwin lead the team in both targets and receptions. His current ADP is 76. He's the 37th wide receiver off the board. I think that's going to rise as we move along in the process, and we're already seeing him being drafted as high as 52nd overall.
Oh, wow.
We do have to acknowledge, though, that he's not quite looked the same since he had his knee injury in 2021, but he's going to be 3 years out from it this season, and it's still just his age 28 season. I think another year with under his belt with who's that dickhead playing quarterback? Baker Mayfield. help build some chemistry there. I think he's a good option. And like I said, I think we're going to be looking at a bounce back. I don't necessarily know that we're going to see 2019 numbers, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he surpasses what he did this year, especially when it comes to the touchdowns. And for where he's being drafted, like what other options around there are going to give you the upside that he is?
Agreed. Awesome.
So the Panthers really shit the bed last year when they drafted Bryce Young, and they didn't do him any favors in terms of the pass catching group he had to work with. In the offseason, they traded for Diontae Johnson to correct that, and I think it was a smart move. How's he going to help improve not only the Panthers offense as a whole, but our fantasy teams as well?
Just guys got a lot of youth and a lot of ability. Traded from Pittsburgh in the offseason. I didn't know this, but since 2020, he's amassed a whopping 547 targets. That's ranking 6th among all wide receivers. Last season, he finished wide receiver 43 in standard and just a couple more, 45 in PPR, averaging 11.7 points per game in PPR. He played in just 13 games, 87 targets, caught 51 of them for just over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. According to NFFC, he is the 41st wide receiver off the board with an ADP of around 93. You know, given his relative youth and ability, Diontae Johnson stands out as really the best offensive weapon on the Carolina Panthers roster right now, and it's not even friggin' close. He can come in and immediately be the new wide receiver 1 option for Bryce Young. He'll be peppered with targets due to his ability to get open through elite route running skills. He's consistently finds ways to get separation despite facing tight coverage in his career. Out of 102 wide receivers last year, he had the 24th best PFF receiving grade at 77.7. He reached a career high 2.1 yards per route run, but his overall production remained pretty modest due to the inconsistent quarterback play in Pittsburgh last season. ADOT 12.7 yards. It makes pretty much sense. That's more his game, working underneath. Mostly lined up outside in Pittsburgh last season, but did line up in the slot almost 22% of the time. I think that's important with this move to Carolina. He'll be the go-to guy there. Dave Canales is going to move him around to exploit any possible matchups. He averaged 5.2 yards after catch per reception. That ranked 30th out of 102 qualified wide receivers. And to catch the ball and get that yak, you need really good hands. He had the 22nd best drop rate last season at just 3.8%. However, in the interest of transparency, he had one of the worst contested catch rates at just 35.3. To be fair, I'll mention again, I think that QB play in Pittsburgh really affected that. You know, even with Bryce Young's struggles last season, he is still a QB upgrade for Johnson versus last year. And here's the biggest question mark, really. Can Bryce Young take a significant leap in his second season? Remember, Bryce Young had a completion percentage under 60%, and he threw almost as many picks as he did touchdowns. But if Young plays better, the Panthers offense, I think, could be a surprise this season with new coach Dave Canales. He's gotten solid years out of Mike Evans, Godwin we just talked about, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett in his time as offensive coordinator in the league. And I think Johnson is being valued a bit too low because of his new situation. On paper, seems to be a downgrade for fantasy. I don't necessarily see it that way. As long as Bryce Young can do something this year and make some progress. Last year, they supported, some fantasy value for dead body Adam Thielen. He was producing as a wide receiver 1 level early in the season before, kind of falling off the cliff along with the rest of the Panthers offense. And it was probably due to the coordinator change and, perhaps his age is catching up to him as well. I don't see any reason Diontae Johnson can't continue to get open at will. He won't have much trouble finding targets. He should find him once again hovering right around the low end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 territory. I think he's worth drafting as early as the 7th round in the majority of leagues, with his value a bit higher in PPR leagues.
Yeah, and you mentioned just, what he was able to do with the wide receivers there in both Seattle and in Tampa Bay, but one thing you didn't bring up is the work that he did with Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith. He turned them into damn Pro Bowl quarterbacks.
That's true. Yep. Yep.
Rising
Very good
tide
point.
lifts all boats. Or
Yep.
ships or whatever the hell it is.
A very, very good point, Matt. So we got a couple more guys. We're going to dive into a couple tight ends. So tight end Sam Laporta deservedly stole all the attention last year, but this Bills tight end had a solid rookie season in his own right. His situation is so good that I think that he could enter the top 3 tight end conversation as the leader of the Bills passing attack. Matt, what's up with Dalton Kincaid?
Dalton friggin' Kincaid. And you're right. Look, Laporta came in and did his thing, and Kincaid was right there with him.
Yeah.
91 targets, 73 grabs, 673 yards. He only found the end zone twice. He finished as the tight end number 11 on the season with 150 points, averaged 9.4 per game. But he was really outstanding in the middle of the season when Dawson Knox was hurt. If you look at weeks 7 through 12, he was the tight end 3, averaging over 14 points per game. And from week 7 through the end of the regular season, he was the tight end 9. And there was a couple duds in there in the fantasy playoffs. Week 15, he, no points. Week 16, 1.7. And I'm sure though there's some of you out there who are a little scorned from that. Despite having just 18 total targets through the first 5 games of the season, he finished with a respectable 16.7% target share. So we know the upside is there, but what is it? Right now, he's kind of in that middle of the second tier of tight ends. In my mind, Laporta and Kelsey are the top 2, and they're their own tier. And then there's 5 or 6 guys in that next tier. I think he can edge towards the top of that tier and maybe even sneak into that top tier. There are a boatload of targets that are coming available because Diggs is gone. 159 of them to be exact.
Yeah.
Now, as nice as it would be if he would get all 159 of them, that's not going to happen.
No.
You've got a Bills offense with a completely remade pass catching core. Curtis Samuel doesn't really scream wide receiver 1 to me. Rookie Keon Coleman is talented for sure, but he's raw. And Khalil Shakir is a good slot, but you're not just going to give him Amon-Ra St. Brown type target volume. Right? He's just not that player. I mean, the man had just 45 targets last season. He's only got 65 for his career. So I think there is a damn good chance that this passing offense is going to be running through Kincaid a lot more than people are realizing. He had just 9 red zone targets last season, and that was kind of not great. And it was actually fewer than position stalwarts Adam Troutman and Donald Parham Jr. He averaged just under 6 targets per game, though, with Joe Brady running the offense. Right now, he's the 5th tight end off the board. He's got an ADP of 55, and this is something else. I think that's about right. But again, his range of outcomes is anywhere from a repeat of last year with, somewhere hovering around that tight end 9 to 12 range, or he could finish as a number 1 overall tight end.
He could.
He really could. And with an ADP of 55, I think there is some profit left there. And tight end is kind of a strange position to draft, right? Because you've got Laporta and Kelsey who are early. And if you want one of them, you're looking somewhere in the mid 20s to maybe 30. And then you've got a nice little gap where, like I said, this second tier of tight ends, there's 5 or 6 dudes who I guess their on-field talent and we'll call it their 75th percentile outcome. They're barely distinguishable from one another. Right. Yeah. But if we start getting to that 90th percentile outcome out of that group, there's nobody I want more than Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah. And you mentioned the red zone targets. I'm sure that's a lot affected by what Josh Allen does with his legs in the red zone.
Absolutely.
Hopefully Kincaid can see some more looks there. He's super, super talented, a big target to throw at in the end zone. So time will tell.
Yes, it will. So our final player today, this guy managed to finish as the tight end 8 with Justin Fields at quarterback, and now he's got an upgrade at QB, but he's also got more competition for targets. What can we expect from Cole Kmet this season?
So yeah, you mentioned he finished at number 8. It's actually finished number 8 in PPR and standard leagues last year. On NFFC, he's the 14th tight end drafted with an ADP of about 128. Played 17 games last season, 90 targets, a career high 73 receptions for 719 yards and 6 touchdowns. That is now 3 seasons in a row playing all 17 games. I think that really shows his durability, especially with this. He was being used a lot in those 3 seasons because the Bears offense just sucked, and he was basically about it, except for when Fields had a good game. Last year, almost half of his receptions, 36 of them, went down for first downs. As inconsistent as the Bears offense was last year, he was just freaking huge in moving the chains. Guy can catch, dude. He's got an elite catch rate of 81.11. That's the second best among all pass catchers, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. 6th best PFF receiving grade among tight ends of a 77.7. He was also the sixth best tight end when it came to yards per route run of 1.69 yards. And just for real quick, for some frame of reference, fantasy tight end number 1 last year, Sam Laporta, was 1.76 yards per route run. So, not too far off. He was the number 2 tight end and 26th pass catcher overall with an average cushion of 6.7. Average cushion measures the distance between a pass catcher and the defender covering him at the time of snap. And that really translated into an amazing amount of separation, average separation. That measures the distance between, the pass catcher, tight end for this instance, and the nearest defender at the time of catch or the time of incompletion. Kmet had 4.1 yards average separation. That was the 4th best in the league among all pass catchers. Not just tight ends, pass catchers. Amazing, amazing stuff there. He lined up in line 41% of the time, but really did most of his damage when lining up in the slot, which he did almost 48% of snaps. At Matt's lead end, he mentioned, some competition and team context there. So it could be an issue in fantasy this year. So the Bears spent a number 1 pick. Everybody knows they drafted Caleb Williams. So the passing game in Chicago should definitely have some added juice in 2024. The problem is that they now have a wide receiver trio there of DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and rookie Rome Odunze, plus Gerald Everett has joined the tight end room. So Kmet, he faces some stiff competition that could easily cap his fantasy upside this year. He does also have a less than favorable schedule versus his position based on standard scoring. But, let's say you're in a 2 tight end league. He is a fantastic option for that. I consider him a high end to mid range tight end 2 this year.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, though, is even though they've got that kind of revamped offense there, it's not like Keenan Allen has a history of playing 16 or 17 games.
That's true.
You've got a rookie wide receiver coming in,
and a quarterback. I mean, it's
right.
Things are going to take time, and sometimes Cole Kmet might be the beneficiary of that because of just the way he's able to separate.
Absolutely.
Heck yeah.
Easiest to throw to the dudes who are open.
That is right. So yeah, good luck, everyone. If you draft these guys and you still lose your league, well, at least you have a great story to tell next year. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You'll never miss a chance to get advice from someone who's definitely never yelled at their TV over a missed field goal. Never, not even once, right? We do fantasy baseball too. Check out our YouTube channel at Stoned On Sports Fantasy Baseball. We are on there every Tuesday and Thursday night, live streaming at 7 p.m. Eastern. Have a great evening, everyone. Stay stoned.
See you, folks.